Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from the Extreme Studios in the Pine Hills Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida. I have with me the young 20-something Professor Pixel, also from Central Florida. The coffee's kicking in. We're getting ready to talk about Columbo episode 3 of season 1, the original TV show from 1971. And yes, the people that have been contacting us, Pixel, saying, when are you going to do the pilots, the original stuff before the first episode on TV? And I said, well, we'll have to do it at the end of season 1. But so far, so good. Everything's going really well in Columbo. 2 strong episodes. We're starting to get the format of how Columbo is as a character, how the episode runs itself. In this one, Pixel, we find ourselves with a bit of an interesting situation here because we have what we call the old classic May-December romance, which I think is a nice different angle on this approach as opposed to the May-December episode before where the one gentleman's a lot older. Here you have a seduction in play as well as a potentially overbearing mother that might throw things in a way. But I got to say, this is a pretty strong episode. I'm trying to put myself in position as somebody in the 70s watching and going, well, how much do you get to see of what happens when you're boating and this and that? But a bit subtle, bit different episode than the first 2, but I think almost equally as strong. I'm pretty impressed by this episode. Definitely a different tone with a lot more of a female stamp to it. What's your initial take, sir?
Well, there's a reason for that. What you said. How much can you actually see while you're out boating? That's a good question because that's what they're asking throughout this entire episode. I think I really do. Just go ahead straight off the bat saying I do think this is a really strong episode. And I didn't think so when it first started, but towards the end it won me over. But I guess we should just dive right in to the bay.
Yeah, start us off, sir.
You will get wet. So we have a highly decorated general who has this great house right on the bay, and a colonel comes to visit, and comes inside because he has something urgent to discuss. Quickly, he says to the general, since you've been retired, we've had all these business dealings, and they're on to me. The government's going to catch me. I gotta go. And General Hollister, that's his name, he hears him. It's like, oh, okay. And what's your plan? Oh, I'm going to leave the country. No, you're not. And he shoots him. Just right there.
No, you're not. Boom.
And after he's shot, we cut to the water. There are 2 women, a mother and daughter, and this is an older daughter, so she's been divorced. She's now living with her mom, and she thinks that she spies through the window of this great house that we know belongs to the general. A man gets shot. I saw a man in uniform.
I thought I saw a gunshot.
Yeah. And her mom tells her, you're crazy. Stop. No, none of this. But it doesn't matter. They go ahead. They get off of the water. The daughter makes a call. The police come. And initially, they don't really believe it. Were you out drinking, ma'am? Do you really think you saw this? And do you know who that house belongs to? Okay. All right. And so they call Columbo onto the scene. The mom and daughter's gone. The potential of a homicide, Columbo goes into the house, gets a look of it, speaks to the general, and was he pulled over in this episode too? No, he drives up, and the police officers in front of the house tell him, "Oh, sir, I'm sorry. This is reserved for police business." And he's like, "Oh, well, that's funny because I am the police."
Yeah. Here's the thing. I was not somebody that watched a lot of Newhart, but the lady in here, Susan Pleshette, she plays the actress. Eddie Albert's the killer here. The one thing I wanted to bring up about him immediately is that we saw Well, let me ask you this. Do you remember how the death went in the first episode?
Yes.
Okay. And remember how we talked about with Robert Culp in the second episode, how it was a different kind of death? It was an accident, really?
Yes.
So we've got two very strong male leads that are the killers. Here we have a third, right? But yet when you go back and you look at the way these three deaths happen, while you would argue that the one was premeditated in the first one and you understand why, and the guy was a playboy, it's cold-blooded murder, and the second one was an accident. This one's deliberate murder, but I feel like the passion, and I hate this sounds kind of odd, the passion, the intensity behind each killing was totally different, because I feel like this, Eddie Albert, the way he portrays this, it's like, yeah, I'm going to kill you. It's not a big deal, because you're a loose end, you are dead
Yep.
weight, hence the name of the episode. And it's a guy that was loyal to him, and we get a totally different sense of his background, because this is a person that's seen the evils of war. He's known for being something. This is almost like, God forbid I say it, a little bit of a modern day general that everybody looks up to, like a MacArthur or something, because by now you've already had Vietnam, you've already had in the late 60s, early 70s, this counterculture coming up where the government working for the man is not a good thing, and people are starting to question, do I really want to go to war? Do I really want to do this? And yet you get this innocent lackey coming in, letting his boy know, hey guy, man, it's going to get screwed up. We're going to get found out. I don't know how or why, but we are. I'm just giving you a heads up. Okay, boom, dead. And again, this is 3 times we've had a gentleman in power, an older gentleman, and they're all very competent, and they all have their great swinging singles bachelor's pad. And I love the one in here too. I'm going, man, he's got the wide open fireplace made of brick. He's got the real plants inside, which you used to see back then. That was a 70s motif. He's dressed up. He's getting ready to a soiree, and he couldn't be bothered at all. And he seems like he has very little arrogance compared to the first two, right? The flamboyant playboy, and then the guy that was like, yeah, I'm going to steer you in the direction I want to. He just couldn't be bothered in here, and I love it. He's ready to go out. He's got the martini in his hand, and they're packing up all the stuff for this big exhibit that's supposed
In
to
his
honor
robe.
him. Yeah, this is good stuff. I like it. It's just, he's got the little tiny small bookshelf of, I want to say mahogany lined shelves with leather book casings, but I'm popping because these guys for 3 episodes now have just a great introduction. You believe that these guys are good. They're not just some scumbag off the streets or some shithead that was on drugs and now the cops got to go find him, or any watered down CSI / medical detective persona where it's more of a rib on how big they are here. Columbo comes in, takes a look at a couple of things or like that, like he usually does, whether his cigars or not, who cares? But it's great. Like I told you before too, when you get to see a character come in, no matter how they're presented or written, what we've seen so far, especially in the first act of all 3 episodes, forgetting Columbo's mannerisms or the villain of the week, you're getting kind of the same template, which is fine. We're familiar with that. It looks different, but you got a lot of these great set pieces where people are walking around in the background. He's showing them stuff. There's not a lot of quick cut and edits. There's just physical motion while people are talking, and that part of acting is great. It's not people standing across a computer screen going, did you find the DNA? Well, I ran the background check. I did this. I did that. This is simple, yet again, it's very effective. And after 3 episodes now, I'm like, good. I'm glad they're not steering off the course they have for it. Because like to your point here, the question is, hey, does this woman actually, did she see what she saw? She was on a boat. It's rocky. It's early. And of course, that means at some point Columbo's going to end up on a boat, which I'm getting ahead of myself here too. But some of the detective stuff I think is pretty good. You get a 70s house where he goes to visit her and there's people partying in the background. I'm like, oh man, this brings back Florida vibes from the 70s. As an 80s kid or whatever like that, I certainly remember certain things like it. But Columbo does what he does great, especially with the ladies. She's an artist. He's not judging her, whether the quality of her work is good or not. And frankly, the way it looks, it sucks. But the bottom line is she's doing what she wants to do. More power to you. He shuts his mouth and he listens. So she's just talking about whatever. He's not hammering her. He's not shotgunning her. We're full of all these questions, with his notepad out, writing things down for the most part. And of course, the mom's there with a stiff drink there too, overseeing everything. And I don't know. I like how he listens. I know that sounds different. It's certainly a lot less different than, say, any of the things that Clint Eastwood did in all his movies there in the 70s, and also different than the stupid militant way that like T.J. Hooker was portrayed as a buffoon, even though I found that entirely enjoyable from an 80s perspective. But again, this is a really, really good setup. He's just basically saying, hey, look, it's going to be asked whether or not you really saw it, if you really this, if you really were drinking, because that's just a part of it. He doesn't make it seem like it's that big a deal. That allows her to relax, that allows her subconscious and her brain to kind of maybe think of some things. But as we both know, what happens in this episode is a little different. Besides having the mom, is the colonel decides to take matters in his own hands. So this is his way of being arrogant, because he knocks on the door to pay the young woman to visit. And I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. So after, I believe it was immediately after Columbo left, he went ahead, he got himself dressed, went to go speak to the dockhand. I don't know the name. Person who's basically keeping an eye on
The boatswain.
So no.
Yeah, whatever.
And asks, because he's well known, he's a respected figure. Asks, so was somebody out on the water, say mid-afternoon, something like that? Because Columbo wouldn't give him an answer. He kept trying to get it from Columbo. So who could have seen such a thing? And Columbo was like, I can't reveal that, sir. So the dockhand's like, yeah, no, I think the only one that went out is a woman who can't boat for the life of her. It's horrible. Do not go out there. And he gets the name. He finds her. And he pays a visit. And he says, well, I heard what you had to say about me. And frankly, I'm shocked, ma'am. But if you really want to get a better picture of me, watch the 11 o'clock news tonight. And then he has to go attend a ceremony because highly decorated, he's being celebrated, and the 11 o'clock news covers him. He's a hero.
Yeah. One thing I find interesting about him choosing the path of getting to know her and seducing her, in a sense, to throw her off, is that, one, it's a different tack than what we've seen for the most part. And also, too, I go back to the original Steve McQueen movie, The Thomas Crown Affair, which I think is one of the best kind of romantic kind of, I'm the man sort of things, rather than the Playboy fantasy of the James Bond movies, which, by the way, on the Extreme Movie Show, you being the young 20-something Professor Pistols, I like to say we're reviewing those in order. We're getting ready to start the Dalton ones here soon. That's a Playboy fantasy. It's a different kind of spy than, say, The Prisoner, which is an intellectual one, or Columbo, or everything else that's out there. But the thing is there seemed to be a more general acceptance about what really happens in the real world that you get to see in media, like on television here, and the occasional movie where the older man is courting a significantly younger woman. It does happen in the real world. Usually it's a man about town, a man of influence of power. And so you can almost see where the mother in here might be a bit jealous of it, and that would be an easy tack to take. But in her own roundabout way, she says, hey, if you play your cards right, this is a guy that's been through it all. He's not as, just inherited the money. This guy's the real deal. And the fact that he's seen so much shit and more, basically, and had everybody look up to him, and he's basically a hero. He literally is, not because he's a schemer like the guy from the first episode. This guy would actually be a catch. And so her being a divorced young woman, and this guy being older, it might be a shock. Oh, how dare you date somebody younger, and all the stuff people would poo-hoo today. But the reality is this stuff happens all the time, and people don't want to talk about it. I like how they ignore it, and they make this guy a man of means. They do everything. And the other thing, too, being Eddie Albert, it's kind of funny, but where he's hiding the body, like, was it behind the bookcase or what, like that, in some secret hidden compartment? I'm like, damn it, this is a guy that would have that in his swinging singles bachelor pad. So it all fits. And he, like I say, just holding a drink there, being chill. And then when he goes to dinner, we don't really see that much of a change in his behavior, do we? We just see him listening to her. It's not an automatic that women throw themselves at you when you're older. You have to play it right. You have to make it seem like they're not going to get hurt, or you're so a big bad man that you're going to be so powerful, you're going to take advantage of them, hit it and quit it, sort of thing, like a younger guy would do. So it's really interesting to watch Suzanne Pleshette's character. She's acts her way through it, kind of like go, well, all right, I'll go for dinner for you, not thinking anything of it, and then start to find out along the way that, hey, this is kind of happening. She kind of gets caught up in it a little bit, rather than, oh, hell no, or anything else. So I really appreciated this particular angle of the episode, because it kind of takes away the fact that yeah, he killed somebody, because that's what we see at the beginning. But here in the middle part of the episode is where you start seeing of some of the background that fleshes out, that makes it like, no, this dude's a legitimate badass. He's not just a scumbag. He's not a guy that feels entitled because he got a title or anything else. It's like kind of like a cool deal. And again, even though we see Columbo somewhat early on, he just listens, and it's really just a few facts of what's going on that gets presented to him through listening that allows him to piece things together. So it's a case of less is more, which I hate, because, as we all know, more is more. But again, I'm liking what they're doing with it. I really wondered by this episode if that would be different. And we get to where Columbo decides to meet him, because there's this talk about fishing and analogy and all that too, where he wants to take Columbo out on his boat. Because he's looking at the boat records and he knows the discrepancy. You said you went out here, but I noticed this, and blah, blah, blah. And you even get to see him, between all this, being cutting through where she works or volunteering. I think, was it a petting zoo or just a zoo in general, generic Zooville, right? So he shows up in a suit and all that, and then that's when it really hits her that this is the real deal. And so, yeah, that they're meeting for dinner and everything. This is nice. It's simple, it's easy, it's effective. You allow yourself to feel your way through it. Columbo comes and talks to her a little bit more. And she's an attractive woman. She's not. It's just a different look by today's standards or whatever. But it's neat, because what does an older man have to offer that he can as a younger man? Well, money's one thing, obviously, but he takes her on the boat. He's not rushing. He's not in a hurry to get where he needs to be. He's taking his time. That's what you have to do. You have to go at the pace a woman is willing to let you go at. Sometimes you can go too slow as a guy or too fast. And why am I talking about relationships? Because that's what mostly happens in this episode. And damn it, he's pretty effective at it. That's the great thing about this episode. He's not the overly flamboyant guy from the first episode. He's not the Robert Culper Danny's like, it was an accident, I'm sorry. He's just seducing her. They got the candles and all that. You can see her kind of feeling a little bit charmed. The attention is always nice. So you're like, damn it, this might work if it wasn't for that guy Columbo here at the end. So, he's dancing with her and all that, and then he starts getting pissed when Columbo gets on the boat and they start going out, and that's kind of what takes us into the last part of this third act here too. But let me pause a little bit, let you gush a little bit about something you liked about this particular scene or scenes.
Yeah, no, the buildup of this quick whirlwind romance is convincing her that, maybe she's wrong. She could be wrong. She's getting to know him. Oh, he's such a great man. He's all the better. And all the while, Columbo, once he learns that he's been speaking to the witness, that's setting something off in him. Because at first, he looked everything through, looked fine. He has no reason to suspect him. And now it's getting more and more evident that it might be the opposite case. I believe there is this one scene where he goes out in the middle of the night on the boat, and that's pretty much when he drops off the body.
Yeah.
There's this long scene between Columbo and him where they go out on the water and they go ahead and speak, and it's another one of those cases where the murderer is getting very annoyed by Columbo's presence because he's always there, and Columbo quickly gets boat sick. But I can't recall if he actually catches any clear information there that sets him off.
Well, in fairness to last episode where we talked about the contact lens and how questionable, for lack of a better word, that might make you go, oh, damn it, they just did that at the end to kind of throw you or whatever, or how realistic would that be, or did it break the magic of the episode sort of thing. I don't know how you feel about it here, because honestly, the one thing we haven't talked about with this romance is the whole gun part where he told him he's got a duplicate and that's what's going to go on. But of course, he really had shot the guy with the real one. So of course, there's a trace for it. So it's you don't even really care about him disposing of the body. To your point, it's what's the key piece that's going to get Columbo to go, yeah, I suspected it when you did this, it elevated here, but now here's where I really knew. And we'll get an answer to that here shortly.
Yeah, because after the boating trip, he's going out on the water again with, this time, the star witness. And afterwards, Columbo pretty much invites her to go ahead and view the exhibit. Everything that he's donated to this exhibit for General McAllister. And he says that I'm not going to ask any questions, nothing like that. That's how he gets her to agree to come. And they're looking over every piece slowly. And eventually, as they get to the replica of of his war pistol, the one that he was closest to, when he has everything else, that one was stolen. That's when the general comes in, sees them, and he's like, "Oh, I had a feeling that you would show up. See, you're a very careful man. You're a very careful man. You've collected everything from your time in war. I find it hard to believe that one of your most prized possessions would have been stolen."
Yeah.
And so I pretty much worked out that the gun that you've donated, it isn't a replica, is it? It's going to match the ballistics for the body that was found on the water. And that was like right before the boating trip. But yeah. And the general, he is a man who accepts defeat. And he says he's sorry. And they take him away.
Yeah. There's a couple things we can still talk about with this episode too, because right now one of the general themes I would say for the first 3 episodes is I want to say, okay, we got our 3 acts. He shows up in all of them. Something in the first one will clue him into possibly what the person is. There's a detail in the second one that we don't really hear about until the 3rd act when we get the reveal. And that second clue is kind of what he's kind of actually, when you go back and look at it, he's ahead of it, but you don't know it at the time watching the episode. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but the whole point that you mentioned here, that the general's gun, what he's identified with, that's a signature, characteristic of him in terms of what he's been through and what everybody knows. He's like, look, you would put it on display. If I had it, I would keep it where everybody could see it, that sort of thing. I just want to have a duplicate made. He's like, so I started thinking then. But the whole point is that, it is a bit of his ego. We see the ego is the undoing of all of them, because in all of them, if all 3 guys just kind of shut their mouth, or even if they were dick about it and said, hey, talk to the friggin' cops or talk to my lawyer, they'd get away with it. Because Columbo, by the middle of the episode, even though we don't see it, his suspicion is right. He's ahead of him. And so by the time we see him in the 3rd act, where it seems like he's a step behind the killer, it's really at that point where he's already figured it out, because they'd figured out where the body was at ahead of time. In other words, to do the ballistic check on it. So when we get the reveal here, you're like, that fucker, it all makes sense here too. But I think the thing about it here, again, with the episode is let's take a minute and back up. Let's talk about Suzanne Pleshette. I think she's a good-looking actress of her age. She definitely has a certain kind of dreamy look to her. She's an artist. I don't know if you want to call her bohemian or a free spirit. I think her character's divorced, so the question is does she seem like the kind of person that it's believable she would be attracted by a powerful, middle-aged man? I think the answer is yes. So I think that's realistic. But again, part of the ego thing has nothing to do with the gun. If he doesn't even bother trying to seduce her and figure out what's going on and steer her in his own way, Columbo's probably not going to pick up on it, because initially he's behind, and we know that in all the episodes. So this pattern of writing kind of continues, and I haven't looked to see if they're different writers. I'm assuming they are, but of course at the end she kind of is like, hey, I keep attracting the wrong guys or whatever, and he's like, no, you're fine, you're whatever. But it made me wonder about her. I didn't think she came across as a loser or a weak-willed woman, or the easy one at the end of the bar. I never got that vibe from her. So it's interesting to see how people view the way some actors or actresses are portrayed in terms of their role, and whether or not they're got a certain level of class to them. This seemed believable, and I think a lot of it has to do to her performance. She did not throw herself at him like the superfan did in episode 1, right? In the second episode too, the wife that was having an affair, Yeah, she's horrible for doing it. She did a really, really bad thing. It's her business between her and her husband's. But when she goes to Culp's office or home, and basically when she gets whacked, she's like, I know I made a mistake. I'm going to go ahead and tell him. We'll figure it out. It's between us. You're not going to have the power over me. You're not going to have the power of relationship. In your own roundabout way, you could argue that's a positive description of a progressive relationship in that, yeah, she fucked up. She shouldn't have boned the coach dude or whatever like that. But the way it's portrayed, it's not like she was slutting it up all the time or whatever. And in here, she's divorced or whatever. So it's interesting the way these women are portrayed, because they're not portrayed as ditzes. They're not portrayed as losers or anything. And it's hard because it's just, you get to a point back in the 70s, I will say, there was a lot more of a stigma if you were divorced or if you were living at home. It's just different today than it was. So I think trying to look at it through those eyes and with her character, I thought, man, if you didn't know that or didn't live through that time, it would be hard to kind of see whether or not her role's very, very good or just filler or whatever. But it's just a different dynamic, right? Yes, the men have to deal with women somehow, some way. We've seen that in 3 episodes. Last episode, not so much, although he did early on, but he kills her. Here, she doesn't die at all, but in the first episode, the one died in the second act too. The super fan that he kills the second one. So it's interesting because I know LK and I are in chat. We're talking about which one's kind of like more evil. The one that planted at the beginning, the accident, maybe that's not, but this guy's cold-blooded. I don't know. They're all equally awful in their own way, but damn it, it's a strong effort, I think, on Eddie Albert's part playing the main guy here too. I was impressed. I feel like I can relax a little bit now, start to settle and go, okay, I think I know what Columbo is going to try to show me in terms of the writing. I'm glad for 3 episodes is be consistent. Those of you that are going to stick around for our 7:00 Eastern time review of Fallout Season 1 are going to see wildly different writing that I will be bringing up there too. But right now, to contrast that, I got to say, these 3 episodes, very consistent, slightly different variations on a theme with how they do it, but it's starting to feel familiar, and I like it so far.
Yeah, no, I'm really enjoying it. We only have 4 more episodes of this season technically, and then we have the 2 that we're going to go back to. So
right,
we don't have much.
I do know that at some point, if I remember, and I don't know if it was for a few episodes or a season or it was a story arc. I don't, the Stranger by week, going to a different place like the Incredible Hulk, like I told you, it came from the Invaders, a Quinn Martin production, which is also a fugitive TV show type thing where the doctor went from town to town helping out things away, looking for one-armed man. Also a Quinn Martin production, and I think Cannon was as well, but not necessarily a lot of major story arc stuff. I don't know with Columbo, what I was saying is that I remember seeing him like with a basset hound or a dog, and I don't know if it was in his car he had carried or if it was his house. And we had talked about his character being portrayed a little bit about kind of goofy and silly, and I'm not getting that vibe with these 3 episodes. He's serious, he's quiet. I was not expecting the whole idea of let the people talk, let them get themselves in trouble, put their foot in their mouth sort of aspect. I never ever got that because I wasn't that familiar with it. And we'll see if things change, as the seasons go on or even the episodes. But again, these 3 are really consistent. So damn it, I already know what I'm going to get with you. We'll see what episode 4 next week's all about. That's going to be pretty cool. But yeah, pretty darn strong showing here. I'm impressed all the way around by the acting, by the writing. The contact lens still kind of me as pissed off, but I can kind of forgive it because everything is just so consistent. I like it. And I just, for some reason, I like looking at stuff from the 70s and the 80s. When you look in the background, we talked about this, the furniture, the gas stations, the population of LA has probably doubled since that time. It's just you get a vibe for what it's like filming, and it's not CGI or all the time's not necessarily always spent on a soundstage either. This is pretty cool. I'm liking it a lot. I'm trying to think of what can we say negative about this episode. I don't know if something stuck out to you that you didn't understand or you thought was kind of thin. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, for this one, like I said, it's a slow start, I feel. Because I had to get about halfway through, and all before that I was just like, this is really slow. I don't know if I'm enjoying this one as much. Even with the bit, like I said, Columbo coming through and not being recognized again by his fellow officers. Yeah, no, it didn't get me until about halfway through the romance. The villain of this week was seeming even more dastardly, in a good way. And it still is a strong episode. We have 3 really strong episodes of television in a row.
It's three episodes where you've got, again, the villain of the week, the killer of the week, whatever you want to call it, and it's all been guys. Okay, that's fine. Maybe we'll throw some women in here. But these guys have all been acting, have been doing it for a while in other shows and episodes or guest stars, whatever you want to call it, their own shows. So they're definitely not newbies. I mean, and so people knew, hey, this is Eddie Albert, this was Robert Culp, whatever, and I forget the guy's name for the first one, but he was phenomenal. And so you're absolutely right. In the first episode, we get total flamboyancy. We get a guy that can sing, dance through the whole 9 yards. He comes out and he's just chewing up the scenery. The next episode, we get a really smart guy that's like, yeah, I fucked up. How can I get out of this here too? And Robert Culp. And then here you get, it's completely the opposite. It is a totally different kind of energy. And that contrast, I think, makes it a strong thing, because you're right. If you're looking for a procedural and, all right, I need y'all to not walk over here. Here, somebody always lifts something up with a pencil or pen. You guys missed this here. Make sure you get prints on that and all that stupid ass shit. We don't necessarily care about the techniques that police have. We might be somewhat familiar with them. We care about human interactions, and what's what Columbo puts on display here, from the murder at the beginning to the way, like I say, Columbo listens. That's different. Different can work in that it can attract your attention to it, and if you're consistent with it, people start realizing this is what it is that you're going to be showing. That's what can make for good TV, not just, oh, we'll do this and we'll just change that or whatever. And so I just don't know how groundbreaking this was considered at the time, but for me watching, I'm looking at it going, this is definitely a breath of fresh air, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Jack Cassidy, yeah. There you go, LK. Yeah. Eddie Albert's character is boring. LK saying if you had one negative, yeah, the intensity and scenery chewing. I agree. It's a letdown. I would just say it's a different portrayal. And I think having some of those things being different is there. If everybody's the same, then nobody looks different. So I liked having an older guy with it. You know, I hope we have another older person, except this time almost ambulatory or something. That would be pretty cool. Or maybe you have somebody that's a lot younger that's going to end up being the killer. I hope we have a woman in here. I hope we have somebody that's not a middle-aged white male in it, just for variety's sake too. I would hope that it would cut across other societal boundaries, and it's not guys that you could argue in their own way are alpha males in the top in their profession, whether it's a playboy, a business owner who's an intelligent guy, because that's what you have so far. So I'm already detecting that theme, but let's give it time after 3 episodes to see if that does change. But yeah, the contrast definitely there, LK, no doubt about it. You cannot, it's like if Jack Cassidy goes on first, you don't want to follow him. That's just how it goes, and I get it. So it was smart of Eddie Albert to be third because of that big contrast, but he held his own. He didn't try to outdo Jack Cassidy, because you can't. He did it his way. Thank you, Eddie Albert, for that. What else, Pixel?
I don't really have anything else. It's a solid episode with, you're right, a completely different killer in a way, even though it is another middle-aged white male.
The light you have in your background shot here reminds me, going back to the early 70s, a big thing was LED strands where the lights would come out at the very tip, that would come out like in a flower or sunburst pattern that you would see, and you would have that kind of design in malls. That looks like a Death Star just rotating through LEDs, but it reminds me of it. So subconsciously, it's like it's taking me back to the 70s already. Just throwing it out there, because when you lean back, your head's the same size as that.
When I lean back here. Yeah, it's pretty large. It's
anything else?
No, that's it. Columbo.
There is just one more thing, Pixel.
Oh, no, just one more thing.
We're getting ready to 7 p.m. Eastern. Again, Fallout, the entire show on Amazon Prime. We're going to talk about it. All 3 of us, I believe, are going to be there, including RDV from the Great Midwest. So hopefully you guys will jump in on that. We try not to get political. We try not to hate watch. We try not to get into that stuff. But boy, I feel like we're going to have a lot to discuss here shortly. But I'll be looking forward to seeing you, Pixel, and everybody else here on the Extreme Movie Show as we do Extreme TV and we do Columbo episode 4 next week. We'll see about getting LK in backstage and coming on for the review as well, too. I know our schedule is a little tight this week, and I got to it late, so we weren't able to set that up. So that's on me, LK. But yeah, be interesting to see you coming in and what you have to think about it. But we'll be in touch with that. Otherwise, guys, thanks for watching, listening. Have a good night. Stay extreme. And as always, see us at the 7 p.m. stream. I want you guys there for Fallout. I got a lot to say. Oh, all right. Good night now. Good night now.
Good night now. This was not a Dan Curtis production.